This is a podcast by The Straits Times.
Hi, this is Health Check. I'm Joyce Teo, a senior health correspondent with The Straits Times. Before we start, we would like to warn you that in this episode, we will talk about suicidal ideation and it may contain distressing content. Today, we're going to talk about suicide and what to do about it and how to cope with suicidal thoughts. So last year in 2022, 476 suicide deaths were reported in Singapore. It was the highest number since the year 2000. And the sad thing was, of the deaths in 2022, 125 involved those just aged 10 to 29. So to discuss this topic, we have invited Ms Sabrina Ooi, the CEO and co-founder of Calm Collective Asia, an organization that aims to normalise mental health conversations in Asia. Sabrina is 33. She was diagnosed with depression at 24. She's battled suicidal thoughts and she lives with bipolar disorder. She was one of our guests in our previous episode on youth mental health. That was a live session where the guests discussed some of the mental health challenges that they face. Hey Sabrina, welcome to Health Check.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to see you again.
Yeah, see you again. I'm kidding. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming down here today to share your experience with us, because recently the suicide stats came out and there was quite a high rate of suicides among youths. You've spoken quite a lot about your battle with suicidal thoughts, right? So yeah, I thought you could come and share them with us and then talk about how you managed them. You mentioned you had depression. So how was it like? When did you first experience it?
Okay, so my experience with depression probably dates back to when I was in primary school, P5, 11 years old. I remember very distinctly that during one of the school holidays, I was feeling very isolated, both from my friends, also from my family. Mom and dad were working full-time. They're doing really well at work, and I was not seeing them very much. And in school, I was having some, difficulties fitting in. Some of my friends had kind of ganged up and said, hey, Sabrina's not going to be our friend anymore. I felt very isolated and lonely, and that really put me into a negative spiral where I felt like, okay, what's the point of living, because no one seems to care and I don't know what the point is anymore. So that was the first time I actually experienced thoughts of suicide or thoughts of ending my life.
At 11?
We were on a family holiday where it was with another family, but my parents were not really spending time with me. Yeah.
Are you the only kid?
I am.
Ah, right. Okay. And then what happened?
But I sat with it, and I think I don't remember very clearly. I actually removed a lot of difficult memories from my mind. I was playing a lot of PlayStation, or I was on Neopets when I was in school. So I was just kind of distracting myself with a lot of online communities, finding friends there rather than in person.
Right. And did you tell your parents about it?
We didn't really have a proper conversation around it at that point. It just kind of, I remember this experience, but then I think I found other coping mechanisms to just distract myself.
Right. 11 is really young. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, I think these thoughts, it comes up a lot, right? And we talk about youth suicide, and obviously there's also lots of suicide happening amongst elderly. A lot of it's really related to isolation, that sense of, what's the point of my existence, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Through therapy, actually, what I found or what I realized that actually came up for me was that in my own upbringing and my environment, where my own parents were actually saying at home during their arguments, if it's not going to go my way, I'm going to go kill myself, right? I was exposed to these ideas in my parents' arguments when they found that it was difficult to express themselves when things were not going their way. I don't know. That's just one hypothesis. There must be other reasons as well. But that was a big realization for me recently in therapy.
Oh dear.
Yeah, actually, I didn't realize I was going to go there. Oops. But it's very important because I think that one of the reasons why someone might think of suicide is because we're exposed to the idea that it can be a solution, right?
Right. There are other ways of coping with your stress.
I think so.
And helping them find those ways as well.
Because stress is normal, but it can also get overwhelming when too many things affect your well-being.
Yeah, so I guess when you had those suicidal thoughts, it was because of the stress that was overwhelming.
Yeah, when you're depressed, it feels like suicide is an option to help you solve those problems that you're facing, that you're feeling overwhelmed by. I actually think that sometimes when people think about suicide as a way out, they're actually looking at it from a perspective that, if I kill myself, I'll stop being a burden to myself and the people around me. They don't have to care about me anymore. I'm just
Right.
going to delete myself and they can forget about it. But, having also lost 2 friends to suicide and also gone through the grief, I know that actually that's not quite the case, lah, right? And actually, when someone kills themselves, when somebody dies, I think there's some research that shows that the 6 people closest to them actually get affected very, very badly, very
Yes.
deeply, right? So actually, that pain gets just transferred to someone near to you.
Yes.
So yeah,
And the trauma stays for many, many years.
it stays. You just perpetuate the trauma and transfer it to someone else. That's a reality. But when you're deep in depression, you're deep in trying to figure out how to solve it, right? I've been in that position where I was suicidal and the people around me were like, Sabrina, you're just being dramatic. Just lighten up, right? I even had a friend who said, Sabrina, you're such a party pooper. I can't invite you to things anymore. Right? And when I hear that kind of thing, I feel like, okay, sorry, I'm a burden, right? Let me just delete myself so that you don't have to bother about me anymore. It really triggers those kind of thoughts, and it validates your decision to kill yourself.
Oh dear, yeah. That's why I think it's such a good thing is to criminalize, because you actually need help rather than being seen as committing a crime.
Yeah, hey, I know I got handcuffed the moment I got pulled off the 20th floor, right?
Mhm.
And the poor police officer was like, girl, were you trying to kill yourself? Yes, I was. Oh, sorry, I need to handcuff you, protocol. Huh? Like that just compounds the shame and like the guilt, behind all of that. And then like that just further reinforces that I better do it properly next time,
Right. It's so ironic, right? I mean, that's when you actually need help.
Yeah. And then you're treated like a criminal. Anyway, so great that it's no longer an offense. Okay, so one of the times I tried to kill myself at another building and really thinking I was going to do it there and then. My dad actually managed to find me after I put my family, extended family into a WhatsApp group and said my goodbyes, right? So he found me and the first thing he said was, Sabrina, what about me? You didn't think about me? And I was like, huh? No, I didn't really think about you, I really thought that this whole depression thing really sucks and I can't get out of it. And the best thing to do is to just unburden everyone and get out of here, right? It really feels like you're in a deep, dark hole and there's really no way out. It really feels very, I guess, in some ways, myopic. You're very attached to those very unhealthy thoughts. And it really shows how unwell your brain and your mental state is. So it's really recognizing that in that state, the person is really unwell, right?
So I guess for the parent, you should put aside your fear.
Yeah.
And then at that point, when you're helping like a younger person, your child or somebody else, to think about that person being sick and then helping them there rather than telling them that
how you're feeling.
Yeah.
No, it's basically like, if you go to someone's hospital bed and they are on life support and then you go there and say, you know what's going to happen to me? I'm going to struggle. I'm going to be, I'm going to be really upset when you go.
Right.
People don't do that, right?
Yeah.
We practice a bit more empathy. It's really difficult to journey with someone who is struggling and, it's hard.
Right.
When you're interacting with a person who is unwell, you have to kind of set that aside and try your best to be there for them.
Yeah, but having gone through it, I mean, when you're like actually battling with all these thoughts, what can be done to actually help the person?
So I think it's really important to view mental health and also depression, even someone who's facing suicidal ideation, through the lens of the biopsychosocial model of mental health. So recognizing that our mental state is influenced by our biology, our psychology, and also the social environment around us. Like, what's up biologically? Is there something going on in my mind that might, need some help in my brain, right? So that's where medication comes in sometimes. Through the psychosocial lens, we're really looking at whether the individual has the resilient skills to navigate the stress that they're facing, right? So is it skills? Is it resources? Sometimes people are overwhelmed by financial burdens. Is it about helping them find viable solutions? And socially, in one's environment, perhaps the people around them are not supportive. Maybe you're hanging out with a bunch of friends who are kind of encouraging you to drink your problems away, just party your night away and just forget about it, right? So I think it's really about examining it from that biopsychosocial lens and recognizing like, okay, which areas can I work on?
To recognize the stress earlier, I guess, to be more aware of it.
Ideally, it's really about tackling the stress as early as possible and also building up our skills and mindset towards managing that stress that comes in.
Mm-hmm. And would you say be open to getting help, I suppose?
As early as possible, yeah. I mean, it's also hard, right? Because a lot of the time, I think society also tells us to, just man up, just deal with it, right? Sleep it off. You can handle it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's hustle culture as well. So this is part of the hustling.
Yeah, that's
the pain.
true.
Yeah, it starts from awareness. How do we encourage people to be more aware about how they're feeling? There's this whole mental health continuum that maps out one's mental health and well-being. So one can, like in the ideal world or in the ideal state, someone would be thriving, very focused and engaged at work and life, doing meaningful things. Then we can also see that at some point in our lives, we are also struggling. And when we're struggling, it means that, okay, maybe we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by stress, but still manageable. And then we kind of go into, survival mode where we're just trying to get through everything, but it's really hard. And that's the point where we also need more help. And then finally it tips into crisis mode. And oftentimes people only seek help when it's too late. When people are in crisis mode, they're feeling suicidal, maybe they'll call the hotline. But the idea here is that we want to make sure that we're able to realize that, okay, we're struggling. So what can we do already? And even when we're thriving, how can we build out our ability to take care of ourselves better through, healthy practices like exercising, getting good sleep? That are just very simple things that can actually really support our overall well-being.
Yeah, just taking time out, meeting friends.
Finding our own support systems, going for therapy or seeing a mental health professional. You don't have to wait till you're in crisis mode to get help. You can do that already when you're struggling. And for me, even when I'm doing well in life or I'm, thriving right now, I still see my therapist once every 3 months just for a check-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like going to the dentist or going for a health checkup. I think there's a shift that we need to make to take care of our mental well-being as early as possible. On a day-to-day basis, one thing I learned from my therapist is that there are 5 research-backed ways to take care of our mental well-being, to promote good mental health. And quite a few of these things are free, right? So sleep is one of them, exercise also, meditation, and then there's talk therapy and medication. So the first 3 we can do for free, right? So yeah, I think it's really about building out our resilient skills and support systems as early as possible. And then when we feel like we're already struggling and finding it hard, just go talk to a professional.
Right, that's true, because we all experience stress differently.
Yeah.
So it can be very stressful for you or for me.
Yeah.
Right. Just to be aware of that and to seek help, right? You're also in this field, right? I mean, what do you think parents or caregivers can do?
Like for parents or friends, I think with my own parents, they were very quick to offer solutions, suggestions. They were very quick to fix. But all that was needed was a listening ear and also support to actually see a professional. So at that point, I was already aware about professional help, right? And I was actually asking my mom, hey, mom, I'm kind of out of money right now, but I know that the thing that will really help me is to go for therapy and to go see a psychiatrist because I'm really not coping anymore. It's really hard. And I recall this conversation on the phone very vividly. I stepped out of the office for like an hour because I was like, I can't write this email. I'm just so depressed. I don't know what to do anymore. It's obviously like a health issue. And I told her what I needed. And she was just saying that like, are you sure? Don't be weak. I'm sure you can. You're not crazy. You don't need that kind of help. And she just said like, okay, just tahan lah, I'm like, no, it was really hard. At that point, I was just really, really overwhelmed. I didn't know what else I could do anymore. And eventually medication and all that actually helped me. But for parents, I really think that, yeah, it's really about offering a listening ear to your kids, validating their experiences. Don't downplay what they're telling you, right? I think it's very tempting to say, oh, no, you're not facing anything very bad. And the thing is, I realize that these reactions come up because parents may be projecting their own fears.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to just keep that in check. Be aware of your own projections and really listen to what your child needs. Because oftentimes they kind of know what they need, right? And just offering that listening ear, asking open-ended questions like, what can I do to help you? How can I support you? Instead of saying like, don't worry about it. It's very, very invalidating and it actually really downplays the experience that the person is facing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear something like that, like, don't worry about it, just sleep it off, it really makes you feel like trying not good enough. And when the recipient hears that, it really feels like, okay, so I'm just not good enough to take up your solution, to just sleep it off.
Makes it worse.
It just makes it worse, yeah.
Right. That's very good advice, actually. And then we're always quick to give advice.
Everywhere.
Like,
I think,
oh my God, I need to help you. Okay, do
yeah,
this,
no,
do
it's,
that.
I think one of the misconceptions is that helping someone is giving them advice. Helping someone is offering them the solution that would help you. The reality is that they are not you. And, every individual at the end of the day actually has their own inner resources. They're also unique. And what we can do is to provide them that safe space to hear them out and to listen to what they need. So I think we're not very good at listening. we tend to be like, okay, I know how to fix that, right? But no, sometimes people do know what they need, right? And as a parent, it's also about improving your own mental health literacy, understanding what mental health is about, right? If you understand that mental health is something that is affected by one's biological makeup, by one's, psychological skills, social environment, then that kind of like offers you a framework to think about like, what else can I do?
Right. That's interesting. I think especially for parents, right? The older generation who may not be so open to mental health conversations.
I need to tell you a story.
Please do.
No, this came from this last just Sunday, right? So we were at Cheng San Seleta's community event, PM Lee Grace event. It was cool. But what happened there was that we actually had a 70-year-old lady come by the booth and said, hey, what is this about? Because we had like mental well-being on this poster. One of our volunteers explained to her what mental health was. So he went through like the whole continuum, what's mental health in Mandarin, And then she paused and said, oh, my son needs this. He's been telling me that he wants to commit suicide. And I don't know how to help, right? And what we were trying to explain here was that we were recruiting people to be facilitators, to help create and support safe spaces for people to listen, connect, and share. We're teaching folks how to be better listeners and how to hold space for people who just need that listening ear to feel validated, to feel that their experiences of suicidal ideation and all that is okay. Because very often in their own communities, in their own circles, people just don't know how to react, actually. I think it starts from there.
Right, so the person actually...
Oh, yeah, she took a postcard from us and hopefully she passed it along to her son. So we hope you'll come for Calm Circles wherever you are.
Find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or via the Google Voice Assistant and Amazon Alexa-enabled devices. And now back to our podcast episode.
Now back to my conversation with Ms Sabrina Ooi, the CEO and co-founder of Come Collective Asia. So tell us about your experience. Like, when did you actually seek help? Because you were diagnosed with depression only when you were 24, right? I mean, like, what made you decide to actually go see a doctor and then to get the diagnosis?
When I was 15, I was going through a bit, I guess, mild depression. And that was the first time I actually went to a GP and I said, hey, I'm feeling really off. And the GP actually, he was one who told me that, sometimes it's something to do with our brains, and let me help you by giving you some pills to manage the anxiety. But also know that, it came with a warning. These pills are also not meant to be a crutch. Just only use it when you feel very overwhelmed. So I already kind of knew that biologically, when I feel very overwhelmed, there's something that can be fixed. Right?
So you were only diagnosed when you were 24.
I was diagnosed with major depression when I was 24, and this was following my friend's suicide. Yeah, it was a really hard time because I was moving into a new place and he planned his suicide to be on the same day. And I was also in a relatively new job. So, all these things happening together was just too much for me. So I actually went to a GP. And he actually said, hey, Sabrina, I think you really need to go see a therapist. So he actually referred me to my first therapist where I saw her. And she said, okay, it sounds a lot like major depression. So I did go for therapy for several months. It was literally every week. That was kind of my lifeline. Yeah.
So what were some of the symptoms? Do you remember when you were 24?
Yeah, no, I do. So, so I think one caveat here is that depression for every person looks different, right? So I can only share my own experience of depression. And so for me, what that looked like was that there was a lot of racing thought, really trying to make sense of why my friend killed himself. That was a big part of that depressive episode. I was also really unable to focus at work. I was doing some simple tasks and I just couldn't get my mind to focus. That was one. And it was really hard for me to get out of bed. So I was just laying in bed a lot, feeling just a lack of meaning, a lack of motivation. And eventually it felt like just really, really overwhelming to the point where my brain was just obsessing over how do I get out of this negative spiral. I started feeling a lot of social anxiety as well because my brain was just latching on to all of these negative thoughts and feeding it. So even when I was trying to surround myself with friends and they were like, oh yeah, fun and games, 24 years old, right? And having fun. It was just, I couldn't feel present. I couldn't connect with them.
But physically, that would be, you couldn't get out of bed.
Physically, I would say it's probably a change in behavior for me. So I was sleeping a lot more than usual. Some people may sleep a lot less than usual, right? So it goes back to change in behavior. For me, it was just starting the day a lot later than usual. I would be normally up at 8-ish. In those days, I was like, okay, 12 o'clock, I guess I shall get up. Being behind on chores, letting my laundry stack up, letting the dishes pile up, and also kind of withdrawing from a lot of social activities.
Right. So weren't you working at that point?
I was. No, but so actually I had a pretty understanding boss, and I told him, hey, I think I need to take a month off. I need to just make sense of this.
I guess the good thing is you actually sought help.
I did. So eventually I actually called Mom, who's in New Zealand, and I was like, hey, I'm here again. Because I went through quite a few rounds of depression. And I was like, I keep thinking about suicide and I don't know what to do anymore. So she said, okay, why don't you just fly over to New Zealand and just be with me? I think the idea is really to start talking about it, right? And not be afraid of judgment. But at the same time, the person you're going to speak to provide that safe enough space for you to talk about it non-judgmentally. So I think it goes back to just being a better listener.
And not be afraid of talking about suicide.
Don't be afraid of talking about suicide because it's a human thing. It's just that it hasn't been talked about as much because it's been taboo, right? So I think it's just going back to also not shying away from these difficult conversations, because when we're able to talk about it openly, then we're able to seek help, we're able to also find other people who may be experiencing the same or have had similar experiences.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful actually. No, but this is really good because people are afraid of talking about it and you just want to sweep it under the carpet.
No,
but that doesn't solve the problem, right?
we just got to talk about it as it is, right? And everyone who's experienced suicidal ideation will have their own stories. I think there's a lot of fear also. I don't know, it's like, oh yeah, don't talk about it, choi, you know?
Yeah, I think people are afraid that when they use the term that it will actually happen, but it's not the case.
No, it's really about educating people that suicide is not taboo and it's not a solution, because there are actually lots of solutions, there are lots of support systems out there that can help you navigate that.
Yeah, so you've battled depression, suicidal thoughts, and also you found out later on that you had bipolar, right? I mean, tell us about it. I mean, was it something that, made you depressed as well, or something that you discovered later on?
So a few years after I got that major depression diagnosis, I got then diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was in a more stable state. So what that did for me was that it actually helped me make sense of the experience that I've been facing. So if you think about depression as a unipolar thing, like one, bipolar means two. So there's the ups and also the downs. So depression is a part of it, but I was also experiencing the ups, right? So the ups, or they would call it mania versus depression. And this also looks very different for everyone. Bipolar is not the same thing for every person. So for me, the symptoms of mania that I experienced was kind of like elevated thinking. You feel like, oh, I'm so amazing. Anything I do will be a success, and I would start like 10 projects at once. Obviously, everything's going to fail. Too many things. And then you have like lots of racing thoughts again, but in a very like excited manner. As opposed to like a negative spiral. And I would be like sleeping very little, maybe 1-2 hours a night, and I'm still like super energized, more irritable. So anything that I'm like, something's off, I'll get very angry easily. And just overall not a very pleasant person to be around. So bipolar disorder is a mood disorder, and the symptoms of it shows up behaviorally as well.
How long did the mania episodes last? Yeah.
So I would have like maybe a month of mania, and then it would usually be followed by maybe 2-3 months, maybe 4 months of depression.
Oh.
So it's very, very debilitating, and it's not helpful for work lah.
When you were younger, did you have such an episode?
I don't think so. So from what I know, from my reading, bipolar tends to kick in your early 20s for a lot of people, and it's usually triggered by like overwhelming
stress,
overwhelming
which is the killer.
stress. Correct.
Oh my
So
God.
it goes back to managing our stress,
right?
Because a lot of people, maybe we have family histories of anything like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder,
Depression, anxiety,
etc., right? But at the end of the day, it's really about learning how to manage the stress.
I mean, your parents, I'm just curious. Do they
try first? I used to be quite angry with them, but then I've since learned to find some empathy towards how they carried themselves and everything. And I think it really goes back to the idea that they didn't know how to manage their stress. They didn't know how to manage their anger, right? I think a lot of like domestic violence, people just being mean to each other, actually just goes back to us not knowing how to deal with our emotions, right? But one of the things that really came up for me was that I talked to my uncle, Sabrina, look at the family history. And when you look at the history, we have, this relative and that relative who obviously has had some kind of mental health condition. So he was like, I'm kind of the lucky one here, but you're maybe not so lucky. The point that he was making was that biologically or based on our family tree, we know that there's some kind of predisposition here. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think it's to acknowledge that maybe, it's just like physical health, right? Maybe you would be
it's like, if people
something.
ask you, are you predisposed to cancer?
Yeah,
right?
or diabetes or something like that, and then you do something about it, right?
Exactly.
So maybe with mental health, that's what we
Same
should
thing.
do as well.
Yeah, do it early. So like, okay, if my mom has diabetes, right? Then I better do something to control my blood sugar levels, make sure that that's managed proactively. So I think that's the stance I'm taking right now. I used to DJ in the past. Obviously, that was not helpful for sleep because I would be like going home at 5, 6 a.m. And and now I make it a point to sleep before midnight and have a consistent sleep routine. Things like that. It's like, what can we do proactively to keep ourselves well and build up our ability to navigate stress when it comes, right? And that also goes back to having that psychoeducation, like being comfortable with our emotions, knowing how to healthily process all of it. So besides self-care and professional help, there is something that's in between that can be really, really helpful and available and also cheap. So there are also lots of organizations in Singapore, across the world, that offer peer support. And what this means is that organizations have been training normal people like you and I to provide that first line support for people's mental well-being. So oftentimes, they would be trained to be really good listeners because sometimes the people around you, your friends, your family, are not very good listeners, right? Giving too much advice. So there are lots of peer support programs that you can just tap into. Some of them are helplines, hotlines. Calm Collective also has a Calm Circles peer support program that's available for free or cheap. So just by plugging into some of these peer support options, it gives you access to a really good trained listening ear, which can help you feel less alone. So if you can't find like a friend or family member to talk to or a colleague, there are lots of these peer support programs, and even workplaces are starting to create their own programs of trained folks.
Are you on medication now?
I am.
Were there times when you felt that maybe you don't need it, but actually,
oh my god,
but actually you do? So
I have so much to say about that.
yeah, so how do you manage it?
No, hey, so the first time I got diagnosed with bipolar, I think it's a very known thing for folks in the psychiatric profession that adherence to your medication is really difficult. Because when people start feeling better, then they're like, I don't need this anymore. So I struggle a lot with taking my medication consistently, at least in the first year. I experienced the good effects of the medication, started feeling better. And then I was like, maybe I don't need this anymore. Got off it, got worse again. And then I was like, okay. There's a difference, right? So yeah, it's really hard to adhere to your medication because you don't see the changes, you don't see the effects visibly, right? It's really a felt experience. And I think also because of the stigma or the taboo, one might feel the pressure to kind of like recover or get out of it ASAP, maybe too early. Yeah, but the reality is that the best way to go about it is really to go back to your medical professional. When your professional says, maybe it's time to get off it, then okay, maybe you can consider it then. For me, I used to be on more medication. I had antidepressants, I had like some meds for anxiety as well. And also I was on double my current dosage of mood stabilizers. Now I'm only on half the dose, right? And I haven't taken antidepressants in, I think, 3 years. What this actually means is that to get to this point, I've actually had to build my own resilience skills to weather through the dips in my mood. So I still experience mild, moderate depression sometimes. I have days where I'm still like just in bed. I'm like, I really cannot do anything today. Everything sucks. I still once in a while have suicidal thoughts that just float through my mind. But I'm a lot better at being aware that they're there, and I'm a lot better at managing the thoughts. I'm a lot better at managing stress as well. So that's why I can have less medication now, but I'm still on it. So yeah.
Okay, interesting. So what else do you do? I mean, you said you've built up your resilience. So besides, sleeping, making sure you have enough sleep every night, exercise perhaps?
Yeah. Oh man. So exercise is still something I'm trying to do better at. But definitely being more active than before is a big thing. I enjoy taking like walks, hiking in nature, practicing yoga. Once in a while I'm like running. So every time you exercise, that's a really natural way for you to feel better, right?
Yes,
to
you
lift
get that
your mood.
endorphins.
Yes,
high,
exactly.
Yeah.
So now I know that when I'm feeling stressed or anxious, I go take a run, I just go on a run and then I'm like, okay, yeah, that's okay, I feel better. Like just really shake it off, right? So exercise has become a coping mechanism for me, especially when I'm feeling anxious or feeling stressed, a bit overwhelmed. I know that movement helps. Sleep for sure. The other one is meditating. So I meditate every morning now, like just 10, 15 minutes a day. It helps me calm my mind. Sometimes when I sleep, I feel very anxious and there's like lots of racing thoughts. I know a lot of people have trouble sleeping. Insomnia is a big thing as well.
Yeah.
But it's really about calming ourselves down physiologically, and that actually helps us to slow down our thoughts and calm our minds as well. It's something that I've had to learn, practice. It wasn't like overnight.
Can't.
Yeah, it's hard.
So I know.
Yeah. So
Do you use an app?
not anymore. Not so much. But there's this really good app called Insight Timer, and it's free. Discipline. It's all discipline. You know. I think if you really want to get better, it's like going to the gym, right? Who wants to go to the gym like that every day? You know. Yeah. No, but it's really about building the discipline into your routine, right? And just making it a non-negotiable for yourself.
I think that's very good
Yeah, I think
advice.
those are the 5 things.
Yeah,
So,
it's very important actually.
nutrition also.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Like,
So my therapist told me this, Sabrina, are you eating a lot of carbs these days? Because carbs can worsen your mood. It's a known fact. So yeah, I mean like carbs, sugars, fried foods, all of that, really, they're not good for us. So one of the things that I did also was to change my diet. I eat a lot less sugary things these days as well.
but that's interesting because I don't know. I mean, maybe is it in Asia or in Singapore? I mean, it's seen as something that
It's staple.
it's like a like instant noodles and all the rice and everything. Those are comfort foods, right?
It
like
is.
when
So I
you're
still have porridge a
feeling
lot.
down,
Yeah.
you want to have like
Yes.
or like half a piece of cake, maybe.
Yeah, no, so I think
Yeah.
for me it's about not cutting it out altogether. I still enjoy my food. I'm a foodie,
Just eat less of it. Like,
I'm sure there are a lot of coffee drinkers, but for me, I had to, because of the mania, I realized that any stimulants would also affect my mood. So caffeine, I cut out coffee, zero
Oh,
coffee
wow.
now for the past 6 years.
wow.
No alcohol.
Wow.
That's a big one for a DJ. I used to be up there spraying champagne showers, But yeah, I just really saying no to alcohol because alcohol is a depressant.
That's great. I mean, just to be aware of your own body, your own health.
And everyone
mental
will
state.
have a different set of needs because everyone is different. And for me, my non-negotiable was, I still love fries, I'm not going to cut it out. French fries, especially from McDonald's when it's fresh and salty.
I love that.
Sure. Like, I love it. So once in a while, I have like my McDonald's treat like once a month or once every 2 weeks. I'll just go by myself, make that pilgrimage, So, so I mean, I think, and then, then I'm like, okay, what else can I cut? Okay, I'll give up the Coke, right? Switch to water. So, yeah, it's about finding that moderation and what works for us to have a healthier lifestyle overall.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Sabrina, for all the tips and thanks for sharing your experiences.
Thank you. Thanks, Joyce.
Well, that's a wrap for Health Check, a podcast series by The Straits Times. I'm Joyce Teo. Don't forget to share this podcast episode with your friends and family. If you'd like to read my articles, we have links in the podcast text description below.